Good morning. Oh, we got to do better than that. Good morning. I just left a heat wave, so I am loving this weather. Well, again, thank you, Catherine, for your leadership, the Board of City Parks Alliance. Thank you, AP Diaz. Thank you to everyone that is here in this beautiful place called Seattle. It is wonderful to be back. My goodness, and to be at this premier event, this being my first Greater and Greener conference with urban park professionals, not only from the United States, but internationally. So just give yourselves a hand for being here and the work that you do. I want to start off by acknowledging, again, the original caretakers of this land, the Duwamish peoples. Again, just a reminder that it is our job to take care of Mother Nature, but also take care of the people that inhabit this earth. And again, I am just so grateful. So again, my name is Dr. Jalonne White-Newsome. People call me Dr. J for short because they usually don't know how to pronounce my first name, so I'm not offended by that. And I have the honor and privilege as serving as the first federal chief environmental justice officer for the White House Council on Environmental Quality, better known as CEQ. Thank you. And if you are not familiar with CEQ, by a show of hands, not that I can really see you, who's heard of CEQ before? Okay, that's usually the reception I get. So I'm just going to say I wasn't sure what they did before either. So I believe in education, and CEQ is a part of the Executive Office of the President. We're a policy council, and our mission is to preserve and protect public health and the environment for the United States of America. And we do that by executing the President's agenda on conservation, sustainability, water, the National Environmental Policy Act, and environmental justice. So that's just a little bit about what we do. So I've spent the last decade or more as a climate researcher and many other jobs, but as a climate researcher, I've explored the impacts of extreme heat on, again, communities and people that are unfortunately disconnected from green space and those seeking environmental justice. Before I even knew the term green space or environmental justice, growing up, I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' home on the west side of Detroit, which meant I spent a lot of time in parks, especially Belle Isle, a large island park in downtown Detroit that, again, I'm feeling the Detroit love. That was a place where we just hung out when I could drive. We had family reunions. I had my baby shower there. But it was also a place with this big water fountain where folks could get respite and cool in heat like we're experiencing right now. And so I soon learned that access to parks and the quality of parks is often dictated by the zip code that you live in. In fact, your zip code sometimes dictates your health. And I think of some of the parks in Southwest Detroit. Like, again, many areas across Detroit, there is culture, vibrancy, community leaders, history, and Southwest Detroit is an amazing part of our city. However, Southwestern Detroit, which is predominantly Latina and Mexican and African American, is also, unfortunately, characterized as being the most polluted zip code in the state of Michigan. So if you can picture a park, specifically Delray Park and Riverside Park, that sits amidst major pollution sources, a steel mill, refinery, wastewater treatment facility, a large bridge connecting the United States and Canada that hosts miles of truck traffic every day, you would imagine that this park is so close to these pollution sources that, again, being a health hazard and harming our babies instead of providing them a safe place to play is a reality. So this idea of access and affordability and health and safety for me is how parks and environmental justice are connected. It is critical that we make sure that the green spaces we create prioritize health and justice for all people. Do you agree? Okay. So for far too long, and I'm sure I'm speaking to some woke people in this audience, communities with environmental justice concerns across our country have continued to face disproportionate exposure to pollution, underinvestment of critical services, and other environmental harms. And President Biden continues to work to deliver on the most ambitious environmental justice agenda in history, which we cannot take for granted because we've seen what can happen when that is not a priority. So to meet this moment, the Biden-Harris administration launched the America the Beautiful, a decade-long challenge to pursue a locally led and voluntary nationwide effort to conserve and connect and restore the lands and waters and wildlife upon which we all depend. Through funding, through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or bill, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, the federal government is investing over $12 billion to create more parks and safe outdoor spaces in nature-deprived communities. This historic funding will help us improve community green space, plant trees, clean up pollution, advance environmental justice, combat the destructive effects of urban heat, and build local capacity to sustain generations. A central part of the President's agenda on environmental justice, if you haven't heard, is another initiative called the Justice 40 Initiative. Now, the Justice 40 Initiative, again, is not a one-time thing or one pot of money. It is actually has this goal that 40% of the overall benefits of investments from our federal government will go to communities that are disadvantaged, that are underinvested, and in many cases marginalized. And so when you think about those same communities that are underinvested and disadvantaged, oftentimes they are the ones that are dealing with, for example, the risk of heat-related death and sickness because of lack of tree canopy, parks, and green spaces. So an example of Justice 40 in action is the Urban and Community Forestry Program, which provides funding for new trees that are being planted in communities to create shade, again, from these extreme temperatures. Now, again, as I said, the Justice 40 Initiative is not just a one-time investment or a single pot of money. It is fundamentally reshaping how the federal government ensures that communities that have been left behind see some of those benefits. But as you know, it's important that we can talk about these communities that are left behind, but you have to be able to identify where those communities are. And so to identify those communities, the Council on Environmental Quality, CEQ, created a climate and economic justice screening tool, better known as the CEJUS. Okay, we have a lot of acronyms in government, I'm sure you know. Now, the CEJUS is an interactive map that uses climate, environmental, socioeconomic burden data, again, to identify these disadvantaged communities that have been underinvested in and overpolluted. But what's cool about it is that our federal agency partners have to use the CEJUS tool as they think about how they're going to activate the Justice 40 Initiative. So it's not optional. So these priorities, these communities are prioritized. So I encourage you in your spare time to check out the CEJUS, Google it, and see where your community lies and what resources that might be available to you. The Biden-Harris administration is also leveraging tools to ensure communities have access to information about the President's Investing in America agenda and understanding our progress on environmental justice. So this year, the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, launched the EJ Clearinghouse, a first-of-its-kind online collection of resources about environmental justice. And also, when we talk about the importance of transparency and accountability in government, CEQ launched the Environmental Justice Scorecard, the first ever government-wide assessment of what the federal government is doing to advance environmental justice. So the scorecard provides information that is accessible and usable so communities can see what the government is actually doing to make progress. Most recently, the administration also launched conservation.gov, all these websites, a new website that can connect people to information and tools and resources and opportunities to support land and water conservation projects, which you might be interested in. So if you haven't already, check out the Clearinghouse, check out the EJ Scorecard, and check out conservation.gov. Now, to achieve our environmental justice goals, we are working in deep partnership to ensure that the voices, the expertise, and the lived experiences of communities with environmental justice concerns are heard in the White House and reflected in our policies. And that is why this administration created the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, better known as the WEJAC, that is composed of, I know, another acronym. Oh, I guess I'm a real fed right now. Anyway, the WEJAC is a body composed of environmental justice leaders that touch every part of this country. And again, they are helping us do our job by institutionalizing policies and tell us what we can do better. And so we now have 36 amazing WEJAC members that sit on this federal advisory committee. And again, they are helping us make environmental justice a reality. But it's not just the members of the WEJAC that are shaping our work here at the White House. I firmly believe that you have to leave the bubble of DC, no shade on DC, but to really stay connected with reality, right? And to make sure that we know what's happening, that we are on the ground and listening to what folks are experiencing and feeling across this country. So to further support that work and strengthen our partnerships with communities, CEQ also launched last year the White House Environmental Justice Campaign. Now, this campaign, the sole goal was to get agency folks into communities to bring resources to places where they haven't been before and to make those connections. And so again, I have a small but mighty EJ team, and we have had maybe over 50 engagements just this year to do just that. To show up and support when we're asked, to see with our own eyes what's happening, but more importantly, be humble enough to really listen and learn from communities on the front line so we can continue to make policies that are more protective and sustainable. Now, I told you a lot of money's been going out, right, through Bill and IRA, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. But again, as a former foundation person, we know that solving the problem is not just having money, but making sure the right folks have access to it and can get it. And so one of the challenges that we continue to hear across the country is the fact that local organizations and nonprofits aren't sure how to access the money related to the Justice 40 initiative, or they don't have the grant writing support or the technical capacity, or can't really figure out the federal grant process. And so really, to address this concern, what we have attempted to do is implement and boost that infrastructure of technical assistance to provide the resources and networks for folks to be able to access these monies. And so one example on the screen is through the Thriving Communities Network that has created 16 environmental justice thriving communities technical assistance centers. That's a long word, but we call them EJ Tic Tacs, right? So they are here across the country to provide support. Again, Google it, right? So as you can tell, we have a lot going on, and I haven't even touched on the new executive order that the president signed last year that gave us the first ever definition of environmental justice for the federal government. That might not seem like a big deal, but it is, again, for the folks that haven't really defined what EJ is. I haven't mentioned all of the environmental regulations that our federal agency partners are working hard to implement, like reducing lead in water pipes and addressing PFAS contamination, improving air quality and advancing clean energy. Again, and even with all that we have going on, it will take all of us, each of you in this room, working together to make President Biden's vision around environmental justice a reality. So, as I close, I think about my youngest daughter, who is now 15, and she is in her 3rd year as a counselor in training for West Bloomfield Parks, which is one of our park systems in southeastern Michigan, which is my home. And part of her job is taking care of the little ones, making sure they have fun and stay hydrated, play games, and spend a lot of time in each of our community parks. In those parks that my daughter works in, they're safe, they're protected from pollution, they're free, they're a pretty nice respite area for all. And that's the reality that I hope that everyone, whether you are low income, Black, brown, indigenous, or disconnected, that one day we can say that everybody has the opportunity to experience parks that are safe and healthy. So as we continue this collective journey, for justice in our parks and beyond, there are 3 things that I want to leave with you as you continue to do the great work that you do in whatever part of the country that you're from. Embrace, encourage, and engage. Now, I usually put my professor hat on and I tell you to write that down, but I'm going to just say it again. Embrace, encourage, and engage. Number 1, embrace the values of environmental justice as you continue to steward parks and partnerships across this country. As I mentioned, we have a new definition of environmental justice. Read it, check it out, understand it. And also, if you know about the environmental justice movement, there are 17 environmental justice principles that have guided the work of many advocates across this country for so long. So I encourage you to think about these frameworks that are out there and see how you can embed them into the work that you're doing. So embrace the values of environmental justice. Secondly, I want to encourage your curiosity. And I say that because as you create parks and other places across this country, make sure that your analysis includes the possibility of unintentional consequences on that community. Ask the right questions to understand the benefits or the possible negative impacts of every decision, policy, or practice. Work to make sure that everyone benefits, not just a select few, equitably and positively. And last but not least, level up your engagement, right? Make sure you are making the space and time in your project timelines to involve the people of that community. The purpose of engagement is to build relationship, right? Healthy, respectful relationships with people and communities that we are called to serve. And those relationships are just as important as our relationship with nature. So again, thank you, Greater and Greener, for all that you do. Let's continue to create a legacy together in a world that will make life better for all people. Appreciate you all. Take care.